Hello and welcome. My name is Ben Morrison. I'm a solutions architect here at Trilio, and today I'm going to be showing the new UI we have for Trilio Vault for Kubernetes. Just like before, you can log in using your kubeconfig credentials, but you can also use OIDC, LDAP, or Google SSO if you wanted to log in any of these different ways. For today, I'm just going to log in using a kubeconfig file. And so here I'll select my kubeconfig and go ahead and log in here. So the first thing we see when we log into TVK is first our cluster management tab. From here we can see all of the clusters we have access to within this single pane of glass. We have our primary cluster where we can make changes or update the license if we need to. And we also have a variety of secondary clusters that we can add. Here we just have one for today, but here we can edit, remove this cluster, or also update the license if we need to. You can see here to access this cluster, we simply add a name, URL, the distribution of the cluster itself, and a kubeconfig file if necessary. To do this, you simply select new cluster and can add in these credentials here. Moving on, we'll go into the backup and recovery section. Here, the backup and recovery section is for managing all of your backups, restores, and different components of your backup plans, such as targets, hooks, and policies. First, we see here all of the namespaces associated with our primary cluster. If we wish, we can select our other clusters and find the exact same dropdown with the exact same material we're going to be going through in our primary. From here, we can search for different namespaces. We can choose our view if we wanted a list view or a honeycomb view to get a better representation of what namespaces are protected and which ones are not. We can also go into dark mode if we wish, but we'll stay in light mode for now. And then also remove and add a variety of different filters, including backup status, restore, scheduling policy, and protection status. From here, I can select a cluster and complete actions such as creating a backup, which just as before will take you through the creation of a backup plan or the selection of a backup plan. To create my backup plan, I go through the exact same steps as you might have seen in previous TVK versions, adding the namespace I want to back up, the name of the backup plan, the target I wish to back up my data and metadata to, and then any encryption secrets, hooks, or scheduling policies or retention policies that I wish to add. I'll remind as well that if I wish, I can add in and create new hooks straight from this backup plan workflow, or as you'll see later, I can create hooks, policies, targets individually as well. A new addition we have as well is I can select multiple namespaces if I wish and do bulk actions, which would be creating a backup for multiple namespaces. Here I'll show what this would look like. I can add in global configurations for this backup plan, and I can also add in namespace level configurations to modify the backup plan for each individual namespace. One last step I'll show is the view and restore summary and some of these other actions I can do with my namespaces. Here I can see the backup and restore summary of this namespace. So it looks like 6 restores have been restored into this namespace, but no backups currently exist for this namespace. I can also take a look at the namespace details as well. Here showing whether the namespace is protected or unprotected, and the objects as well that exist within this namespace. And finally, I'll take a look at the target summary. So here it looks like 2.88 megabytes of data has been consumed or taken up by this namespace's backup plan. So what this means then is that this backup plan must have had a few backups that were deleted. And now I'll take a look at the target summary in a namespace that we know does in fact have a backup from the last backup status being available. Here we'll be able to see all of the targets accessible to us within this cluster, but more specifically to this namespace, we will see whatever amount of storage has been taken up by backups from this namespace. So here we can see 211 megabytes of data has been taken up from this namespace's backups. Next, I'll go to the application level. From here, you can see, just as before, all the different labels we have access to backup, as well as the Helm operators and the objects that we can individually backup as well. Remember, with TVK, you can backup at the namespace, label, Helm, operator, or even object level. From here, just as with the namespaces, I can select a variety of different labels, do a backup, create a backup, and from here, either select a backup plan, which one does not exist yet for these 3 labels. And so then I would go into creating that backup plan, just as I did before with the namespaces. Now taking a look at these backup plans, as I mentioned before, you can create backup plans on the fly when you go to create a backup itself, or you can come into the backup plan tab to create a new backup plan for either an application, a single namespace, or multiple namespaces. From here, I can just take a look at some of the actions I can do with these backup plans, such as editing the backup plan itself, creating a clone of that backup plan. I can create a backup, kick off a backup from this plan if I wish, view the backup and restore summary of my backup plan right here, view the YAML file, or of course delete the backup plan if I need to. Another very cool feature that we recently added in is if you select multiple resources, which includes the backup plans, targets, hooks, or policies, then you can compare your YAML files. So I can see the differences in 2 different backup plans at the YAML file level if I wish to get much more granular in understanding the differences between these 2 backup plans. Moving on to the targets here, I can see what targets I have available in this entire cluster. I'll point out too as well that for all of these resources, I can select an individual namespace to look into, but for now, for the sake of this demo, I'll stick to all namespaces. Here I can see all my targets I have available, the storage available within each of these targets, the status of whether it is being provisioned, is available, or if it is currently unavailable, the creation date, a variety of different details. If I wanted to create a new target, I simply select the namespace I want to deploy that target into. Remember now that when you create a target, you select a namespace for it to be into initially, but from there, you can easily move targets from one namespace to another. I also would select the threshold capacity, whether it is NFS or object store, and then add in the vendor, bucket, regional, and URL details if needed, as well as creating a secret for that target as well. I'll then lastly take a look at the target browsing. If you're familiar with previous versions of TVK, then you'll remember this as well. Here we have target browsing enabled on this cluster we have here that looks like it's an object store AWS S3 bucket. Here I can take a look at the target browser by selecting Launch Browser, and this allows me to look at all of the backups that are available within this target. So here I don't need access to the source cluster in which this backup was taken. I can actually select one of these backups, and then if I wish to, I could restore it directly into my current primary backup by selecting Restore here. Continuing on here, we'll take a look at hooks. Here are all of the example and test hooks we have available. Again, you can create new hooks here, or you can create them when you build out that backup plan itself. You can see some of the details of these pre and post commands. And of course, you can edit, clone, view the YAML, or delete any of these hooks as needed. And lastly, we'll take a look at the policies. We have two different types of policies: scheduling policies and retention policies. Scheduling policies dictates how often a backup is taken. So for example, here we have a backup occurring at midnight on day 1 of the month, only in January. So it looks like that backup is only taken once a year at midnight on the first day of January. I can, of course, edit, clone, view YAML, and delete these scheduling policies as well, or create a new scheduling policy from here if I wish. Again, selecting the namespace I wish to create this scheduling policy in. Just do an example name here, and I can select that hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly backup schedule. For retention policies, I can take a look again at these different examples. These policies decide how many backups are kept at any given time. So for example, we have a lot of yearly backups here saying that only one backup should be kept every year. Again, these are just tests and example policies. Here is another policy showing that the latest 5 backups should be kept at any given time. So this means that if a scheduling policy tells a backup plan to take a backup every day, then on the 6th day, when 6 backups exist, 1 will be eliminated and 5 will still remain. Now remember that the full backup will always still be available, so you will not lose any data when it comes to these backups being removed. It is just to reduce clutter. Now that we've taken a look at the entire backup and recovery section of TVK, we can go into these final 2 sections, which will be much quicker to go through here. For our monitoring tab, we can take a look at our Trilio Vault monitoring as well as Valero monitoring as well. You may remember from previous versions of TVK that you can also connect any cluster that has Valero existing in it. TVK will automatically find that instance of Valero in your cluster, and you will be able to monitor and see any of the backups and restores that you have done through Valero. Really just to make sure that you have a smooth transition from using Valero into transferring to Trilio Vault for Kubernetes. We'll take a look at this Trilio Vault Trilio Vault monitoring dashboard. Here I can quickly see my backup summary, how many failed backups I had, which looks like just 2 here. I have 18 successful backups, and I have no backups in progress at the moment. For my restore summary, I have 27 failed, 26 successful, and no restores in progress at this time. I can, of course, go one level deeper into the cluster monitoring summary and take a look at backups that have happened just in the last 24 hours. So it looks like 1 test backup was created and successful in the last 24 hours, or I can go to any other length of time, all the way up to a monthly time range, looking at any backups that have occurred in the past month. Again, seeing all backups, those that have failed, or those that are available. Now, lastly, I'll go into the disaster recovery section. Here again, just staying in my primary cluster. Remember, everything I've gone through with my primary cluster is also accessible in any secondary clusters you have available. And here I can see a variety of disaster recovery plans that have already occurred. Actually, for the sake of new disaster recovery plans, let's go into this secondary cluster just to show how we can bring in different backups into a new cluster. So I'll create a new disaster recovery plan. I'll just do dr example, and I can select any target that I have provisions and set up in this current OpenShift cluster scope test cluster that I have. So here I'll just select one of these AWS targets, and I can see here there's a backup plan that exists. All I have to do in this dr workflow is the same as previous versions. I select what backup plan I want to restore. I'll note that you can select multiple backup plans if you wish. And then from here, simply name the restore disaster recovery plan however you wish, the name of the restore itself of this DR plan, that is, what namespace you want to restore into, what encryption secret you might want to include, any flags you might want to include here, and just as before, I can include transforms, exclusions, and hooks. Just as a reminder, transforms allow you to change the actual data of an application, or of a backup rather, before it is even restored into your new cluster. So for example, if I wanted to change some details of my service account, I could go in here and select the replace operation, add in the path of any specific details I wish to change, and then add in the value, the new value that I wish to change that path to. Same concept goes for exclude resources as well for these exclusions. If I wanted here, I can simply select this service account again, and I can decide to exclude this service account from my restore process, so it is not even restored into my new cluster. And lastly, just as with backups, I can add in hooks for any script that you wish to be executed before that restore process occurs and before that application is restored into that new cluster. I thank you all for joining me today. That concludes our demo of the new user interface for Trilio Vault for Kubernetes. I hope you look forward to using this TVK UI. I know I am as well, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.